Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Partnerships for Profit. I'm your host, Ana Del Rio, and this week we're joined by Larry Russ, founding partner of Russ, August, and Kabat, serial entrepreneur, investor, and board member across industries from 911 emergency services to fashion and diagnostics. We'll dive into how he built one of the most successful boutique law firms in the U.S., scaled multiple companies, and now partners with founders, investors, and family offices to do serious deal making in a new economic landscape. Thank you so much for being on the show, Larry. How are you doing today?
I'm great. That was a mouthful.
It was. I hope I got it all out eloquently, All right, Larry, well, let's dive right in. How about you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into, law?
Let's see. I was born in New Jersey on a chicken farm, moved to Los Angeles when I was 9, and my parents got into clothing stores. They had small retail stores, and I worked there in the summers and every holiday, and swore to myself that I would never be involved in the apparel business ever again. And ended up going to law school. I went to Berkeley, and then I went to law school in San Francisco and moved back down to LA, became a lawyer, and started building a firm. And lo and behold, I started getting involved in all kinds of different cases. And one of the cases I got involved in was an apparel case. And I happen to know a lot about apparel because I grew up in that world as a teenager. And somehow I got embroiled in that all over again and ended up becoming a partner of a very well-known, iconic store called American Rag here in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of known all over the world because it was one of the best denim stores in the world, voted on a few times over the past few years.
Very cool. So what type of law do you actually practice?
So my practice is composed of two main things. Mm-hmm. One is intellectual property, which involves patent, trademark, copyright, trade secrets, and trade dress. And I'll explain what some of those things are in a minute. And then the other part, and that's most of what I'm focusing on now, is mergers and acquisition, which is basically helping companies grow, buy, and sell their companies, teaching founders how to grow their companies and then helping them sell it, or helping companies get started, helping them grow, and ultimately with the objective of creating wealth for the founders and helping them sell it. And very also cool. Buying companies, obviously.
Of course. Okay, so let's just get these questions out of the way because I really am interested in the responses that you have for what I'm about to ask. So you've challenged giants like Levi's, Yahoo, and LinkedIn. What's the mindset required to take on cases most lawyers would run from?
Well, first off, the mindset you have to have is just not to be afraid of a challenge, of taking on a big company. You have to look at it as like taking on any other company. It doesn't really matter what the size of the company is. For example, our law firm regularly sues Apple and Samsung and Verizon and Western Digital and other large companies when we believe that those companies have done something wrong. And I'll give you a few examples. So when I was a young lawyer, one of the first cases I worked on was Levi Strauss. At the time, Levi Strauss was one of the biggest denim companies in the world, and there weren't a whole lot of other competitors. And because of their power, they controlled the price at which jeans were sold. So if you were a retailer selling Levi's jeans, you couldn't discount it. And so the first case they ever worked on was suing Levi Strauss for doing that. And fortunately for Levi Strauss, they realized that they did something wrong and they changed their practices. And so that kind of changed the industry.
Mhm.
There were other things that happened along the way that are kind of fun to talk about. You might remember that when Yahoo was a young company, their famous tagline was a yodel that was
Mhm.
basically Yahoo, but it was
Mhm.
in the form of a yodel. And this famous yodeler, whose name was Wiley Gustafson, recorded his yodel for Yahoo, and they paid him $250. Little
Oh,
did he know
cool.
at the time that he recorded this that they were going to use that yodel over and over and over again in all of their advertisements.
Mhm.
So we got hired to figure out what to do, and we sued Yahoo. And again, to Yahoo's credit, they realized that was not fair, and they resolved the issue pretty promptly. And
Mhm.
I'm not allowed to disclose the details, but that was kind of fun. I
Mhm.
had
I'm
him
sure.
record his yodel for 2 minutes so that he could copyright it, and we'll talk about what copyright is in a minute. And then finally, this is something that almost most of your listeners will relate to, is early on in LinkedIn's history,
Mhm.
um, you used to get invites from all kinds of folks that you never knew or that you
Mhm.
knew briefly. And LinkedIn was sending invites to people on your behalf that you didn't know. And it was embarrassing. And we kind of looked at this and said, this is a violation of people's privacy. So we
Right.
filed a class action against LinkedIn
Mm.
and got them to change their policies. And so now that's not happening anymore. So,
Wow.
you know, because of these early successes, we kind of learned not to be afraid of taking on big companies, no matter what the challenge is, if we really believed in the case.
Yeah, you really can't be afraid to take on those big boys there. So you have worked with fashion, tech, entertainment, and consumer brands. What surprising legal pattern ties all these industries together?
Um, well, there's a surprising amount of commonality between fashion, tech, and entertainment that would be kind of unusual for people to think about.
Of course.
So, for example, all of these companies need a great name, an easy to remember name, like
Mhm.
Apple or Google or Rolex, and those names are called trademarks. And trademarks are essential to create consumer recognition for a company's brand. So once one owns a trademark for the brand, no one else can use that name without
Mhm.
facing a lawsuit.
Mhm.
Now, in the fashion, tech, and entertainment industries, they also all rely on what is called a copyright. What's a copyright? A copyright protects content, like a movie or a fabric design
Mhm.
or a software application. All of this content is legally protected by copyright law throughout the world. So once a company registers its copyrights, no one else can use that content again without risking being sued.
Mhm.
Um, Trademark rights and copyright rights are what add value to a company when it wants to go on sale.
Mhm.
That's why movie companies like Warner Brothers and MGM can sell their copyrighted movies for billions of dollars.
Mhm.
And then one thing we haven't talked about is patents. Um, Patents on new technology are a legal method of protecting inventions by tech companies or inventors that sell their inventions to tech companies. And in the clothing industry, a design patent can be obtained for a shoe that is a completely novel shoe design, like
Mhm.
the red soles on a Louboutin
Baton. Mhm.
high heel shoe. So,
Mhm.
so that's where they all kind of intersect through these areas of law.
Very cool. So what was the moment when you realized the legal battle wasn't just about winning but about shaping like an entire industry?
So, the story I told a few minutes ago about Levi Strauss, that was my
Mhm.
very, very first case as a young lawyer. And that was something that I really believed in. I started out in law school as an antitrust lawyer, and that was kind of my passion. And an antitrust lawyer is involved in taking on big companies on behalf of small companies when big companies are trying to push these small companies out of business. I thought that was really my calling on the planet. And so that's what I did for the first few years of my practice. So this was my very first case. It was an antitrust case, and it was all about Levi Strauss fixing the prices on its jeans. And what happened was there was a small chain of retail stores in Wichita, Kansas, called Jeans Unlimited, and they used to sell Levi's at a discount. And Levi's didn't like that, so it cut them off and terminated them and would refuse to sell them. And that was their biggest business. So this company was going to go out of business, and they had, like, at the time, maybe 5 or 6 stores. So we sued Levi Strauss and ultimately got them to change their practice. And so that was the first time I realized, hey, you can use your professional training to actually change an industry and really make an impact. Another kind of big game changer, and this is, a lot of people don't know about this kind of stuff. So there's something called gray market products. What is that? So companies like Rolex and Yamaha and Chanel that make products outside of the US, when they sell their companies in the US, they strictly control the distribution because they're able to command higher prices to do that when they really restrict the sellers that can sell the products. Well, that motivated some very smart companies like Costco and other companies to start importing these genuine Rolex, Chanel, and Yamaha products into the US, and then competing with these companies by selling these products at lower prices. Well, I'll bet you can guess what happened. Rolex and other companies didn't like that, so they sued the Costcos of the world. I got involved in representing a company that was importing Yamaha synthesizers and audio products. And at that time, synthesizers were really new. Every musician wanted one, and there was a line around the block to buy these things. And so Yamaha really controlled that market. And our client imported these Yamaha synthesizers from overseas and competed with Yamaha at even a lower price. Well, Yamaha didn't like that, so they sued. And ultimately, the whole issue of gray marketing products and the legality of that went up to the Supreme Court. And I was fortunate enough to be able to participate in that and author one of the arguments that the Supreme Court adopted and finally concluded that as long as the goods are genuine, it's okay to sell them in the US in competition with the local distributors. So that really changed an entire industry for multiple products. And that made a big difference in this country. It was a huge thing. You can imagine it had to go up to the Supreme Court twice.
That is huge.
The last thing I'll tell you about is more current and involves GT 500 racing cars, which is kind of a converted, kind of a souped up Mustang. And that's made by Shelby. And Shelby is a very famous brand. They make race cars, and they make souped up Mustangs and other vehicles. And a souped up GT 500 was a feature in a movie called Gone in 60 Seconds. And there were several of those movies, and a lot of people have watched those movies. Very entertaining. And in this movie, the GT 500 had a name. It was called Eleanor. Well, after the movie was made, the producer of the movie claimed that Shelby couldn't sell any more GT 500s because Eleanor was a character in a movie and had a character copyright and could prevent Shelby from selling cars that looked like the Eleanor in the movie. Well, this also went up and down to courts of appeal. And I'm happy to say that most recently, the courts have clarified what it takes to be a character in a movie, and it has to be able to have a mind of its own, so to speak. And so it really clarified the whole area of what it means to be a character in a movie. So that those are the kinds of things that can have a real impact on an entire industry. In this case, the movie industry, and so that's how that went.
Are you able to tell us the outcome of what happened with that GT 500 and
Yes,
Eleanor?
the court found that Eleanor was not a character,
Oh.
and had no rights to stop Shelby from selling any of its cars, and basically said, look, it's not a character, it's just a car. So that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they tried. Definitely tried that. So how has your shift into mergers and acquisition and advising emerging companies changed your perspective on the future of business and innovation?
You know, the United States has always been a place where hardworking, creative people could figure out a way to thrive.
Right.
And after years of working as a trial lawyer, I became more and more envious of my clients. Some of these folks started from scratch and built companies and ultimately sold their companies for a great deal of money. And these people were all typically very confident in their ideas, confident in their ability to grow a business, and were willing to take a risk. And most of all, they were willing to fail. That was a really big characteristic of people that succeed in business. You have to be willing to take the risk of failure and not be not let that be an obstacle in what you're going to do with your life. And these are rare qualities, and people like Elon Musk and Sergey Brin and Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg all had those qualities. So I learned my lesson in practicing law, that every difficult task has risk, and it's a challenge. And I learned that it was important to kind of believe in your point of view, be willing to fight for that, and be willing to take a risk. So I started applying those same lessons in the business world outside of my law practice. And I started buying industrial real estate, and then I started investing in odd things like a fresh cut vegetable company where I met two young men that I thought were going to be successful, and they were. They created the largest regional company of its size in California. Then I morphed into fashion retailing. I told you about American Rag a minute ago. And then I realized ultimately that technology is really what I really needed to learn about and pay more attention to. So I started investing in tech companies and becoming involved as an owner and a director. And what I'm learning now in terms of what I think people need to realize is that artificial intelligence, you read it every day, is rapidly changing everything and will have an impact on businesses we can't even imagine at this point. Lots of people are afraid of artificial intelligence and what it might do, but I'm an optimist. So I think AI is going to help aspiring small businesses to have access to the most sophisticated consulting services offered by ChatGPT and Grok and many others. I mean, so much information is available on AI to a small business that they'd never have access to in the past. And that access is going to be free or at a very nominal cost.
Right.
And small businesses will also be able to function with fewer employees. And employees of companies or any person will be able to start their own business using a lot less capital by really kind of using some of this AI information to help them figure out how to build a business, how to start a business, ideas for creating a business. And here's one that is really unusual. People can even use AI to write code. So imagine a layperson that has no idea about how to write code decides that they want to create a cell phone app. And all they have to do is use AI to create a code that does exactly what they want it to do without ever having to hire an IT expert. That is a technical expert of some sort.
Right.
So in short, AI is going to help the regular person innovate, explore ideas, and even teach them how to start a business. So how does that relate to what we do?
Yeah, I'm very curious on that.
So, so our job at Russ, August and Cabot is and this is part of our mergers and acquisition department, and it's what I'm really the most involved in right now. Our team is all about helping small and medium-sized companies stay focused on their core products and services, and also help them raise capital and guide them through the growth of their business, and also guide them through all the legal issues that sometimes confront small companies and large companies for that matter, and kind of help them through it without creating any disasters in their path. Right now, we already work with dozens of startups and mature companies, and we help them maximize their potential, guide them through potential legal nightmares, and we help finders try to attain their American dream.
That's very, very cool. Now, I do have one last question for you. So you're very deeply embedded in both the legal world and the fashion industry. So how do these two worlds collide in ways that most people never see?
So, as most people know, styles repeat themselves every decade or so. They become popular, then they burn out. 20 years later, they're back in vogue again. Think about bell bottoms or super tight jeans or super baggy jeans or cut off shorts. And then there are items that never go out of style, like a classic white t-shirt or a polo shirt in lots of different colors.
Right.
So the legal problem in the fashion industry is that anyone can copy these fashion items without any legal problem. You cannot get a copyright or a trademark or a design patent on a garment that's been out in the marketplace in the past. So manufacturers have to rely on quality of their products and the speed to market, because invariably a popular product that's doing well out in the marketplace is going to be copied by cheaper producers.
Right.
So often you'll see some really cool thing out in the marketplace at some higher end retailer, and you'll find it at Costco 6 months later.
Right.
On the other side of that coin, many U.S. clothing manufacturers rely on new textile designs from China, Taiwan, and other countries. And these designs are often copyrighted by the original creator of the design. But China copied that design without getting permission from the author. But the manufacturer doesn't know that until its garments are already in retail stores. Then it gets sued for copyright infringement and has to pay all of its profits to the author of the design. So that is a continuing problem in the fashion industry. And so manufacturers are having to be very, very careful of making sure that the designs that they're getting from their foreign sources are actually licensed by the original authors of the design.
That is,
Yeah, so the one thing that I haven't talked about is a trade dress. And trade dress is not really a word that most people understand, but they'll appreciate when I tell you what it is. Trade dress is the unique design of a particular product. Think about a Coke bottle. If you see a Coke bottle and it doesn't have the word Coke on it, you know it's a Coke bottle. Consumers will relate to that Coke bottle and understands the design. It sees a bottle in the shape of a Coke bottle and knows that's a Coke bottle.
Right.
And so products, the design of a product can be protected by trade dress. So a few minutes back, we talked about the Louboutin red soles. And so now shoe manufacturers can't make a high-heeled shoe with a red sole without being sued by Louboutin because its red sole is trade dress and nobody else can use that. So this is how this all intersects. Fashion and law intersects.
Very cool. This was such an interesting interview. I really enjoyed it. Do us a favor and tell everyone how they can find you and obtain your services.
So our website is raklaw.com. And by going on that website, you can reach us anytime. It's got our email addresses. My email address is lruss@raklaw.com. And we are always open and available to speaking to anybody in the business world that needs to have somebody consult with and raise and kind of address any problem that exists or help them grow or sell their company.
Perfect. Thank you so much again for being on the show. And you guys have heard it here. If you enjoyed what you saw, enjoyed what you heard, please go ahead, like, share, and subscribe. And I hope that everybody has a great rest of the day. Thank you again, Larry, for being on the show.
Thank you, Anna. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.